All right, good morning. It is June 30th, 2026, and we are in The Habits of Health by Dr. Wayne Scott Anderson. And this is our second chunk in 2.7, which is the science of healthy eating and weight loss. We're on page 293. And we're looking at the macronutrients, and actually we'll go up to the top of that page. Macronutrients is fuel. So we have carbohydrates, which are 4 calories per gram. We have fat, which is 9 calories per gram. Do you see how fat is very calorie dense? And he talks about that often. And then protein is 4 calories per gram. And alcohol is 7 calories per gram. And he says, yes, that's a macronutrient, but it really doesn't have any benefits for it. Now we're on the right sidebar. Dr. A says, when our insulin levels are too high for too long, a result of eating unhealthy, high glycemic foods, we move quickly from a state of health to non-sickness and disease. All right, and we are at the spot where we're talking about carbohydrates. Actually, let's start above that. Macronutrients, carbohydrates, fats, protein, and alcohol are the body's main fuel sources. The number of calories per gram differs, with fat containing the most calories, alcohol the second most, and carbohydrates and protein the least. Carbohydrates, 50% of your daily calories. So range 40 to 50%. So again, that's during the losing phase. We usually hit closer to 40 on the low glycemic carbohydrates. So one of the primary drivers of my healthy eating system is the relationship between carbohydrates you eat and your body's production of insulin, the key hormone in energy management. When you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar or glucose levels rise, causing your pancreas to secrete insulin. This flood of insulin unlocks the gates and allows your body's tissue, especially muscle, your greatest energy consumer, to use glucose as an energy source. And recognize muscle, I've always talked about it's an active tissue. It burns calories even at rest, versus fat burns nothing. So that's what he's talking about there. It's a active tissue. It burns and consumes calories even at rest. As a result, your blood sugar returns to normal. In a healthy individual, glucose levels peaks about 30 minutes after a meal. Insulin levels rise accordingly, just behind the rising glucose level. It's a fine-tuned cycle that keeps blood sugar precisely controlled, as you can see in the following chart. And again, if you go back a couple, I think it might have even been in 2.6, it talks about how that blood sugar rises and then it brings it down. And then that other 2.5 hours is where our body is burning our stored fat as its energy. So he talks about it kind of being a fasting period, because we've only brought in so much food. Those fuelings are only about 110 calories, protein carb balance. It's crazy science behind this. Dr. A says on the left sidebar, right now, over 8 million Americans have diabetes and don't even know it. So there is a picture here, and it's just how the body releases the insulin, and how the blood glucose comes up within about 30 minutes. Right there. In a healthy individual, blood sugar, glucose, levels rise and peak about 30 minutes after a meal. Insulin is secreted in response at a precisely controlled level that lags just behind that of the blood sugar. One of insulin's key roles is to determine whether the body takes more of its energy from carbohydrates or from fat. When insulin levels are low, as they are just after you get up in the morning, your body burns mainly fat. Having a healthy, low glycemic breakfast can keep you in a fat-burning state as can a little early morning activity. When you follow this pattern, your body uses those healthy breakfast carbohydrates right away for energy instead of storing them away as fat. Conversely, when insulin levels are high, for example, after eating a high carbohydrate meal, your body burns mainly carbohydrates and stores the fat. So habits of healthy eating state, healthy waistline. So balanced calorie, healthy fueling, fuel from the food, the normal insulin, stable weight, and any excess fuel enters fat cells, and the fat cells normal function, and then fuel from fat cells between meals. So in fact, the major food groups, carbohydrates, starches, and sugars, are by far the greatest stimulators of insulin. That's why it's so important to eat low glycemic carbohydrates, which don't raise the blood sugar as much as high glycemic carbohydrates do, which puts less demand on the pancreas to produce insulin. As you look at the healthy eating state, let's summarize why it is important to have the right fuel in the right amounts and at the right times. Healthy eating fed state just after you have finished eating. So it has a cycle there. As you finish one of your healthy meals, the body starts absorbing the food. In response to the portion controlled low glycemic meal, your blood sugar and, to a lesser extent, your blood fat and protein levels increase. However, the carbohydrates causes the release of insulin to help the glucose into the muscles, cells, and important organs, and the meal provides the energy. Once the meal has been fully digested, we enter the post-absorptive state. So that's what I was talking about, that fasting time, where our body actually uses our stored fat as its insulin, as its energy. So healthy eating post-absorptive state once you are done digesting your food. So again, after we fuel with that small 100-calorie protein carb balance, we put that in and it brings our blood sugar up. Our pancreas releases the insulin covers that food, brings it back down. And when it gets down here, our body, for depending on how long we go in between meals, for that 2 hours, that's where it's burning our stored fat. That's why it's really important not to munch in between meals and allow our body to be in a great fat burn. And that's where we get all of our extra energies, because we have never-ending calories in our fat storage when we have extra weight. Now, as we get closer to our healthy weight, we've got to be really mindful. If we start getting hungry, sometimes our body needs more food because we don't have as much fat to burn. So that's why make sure to talk to your coach when it comes time and you're getting closer to that healthy weight. We do not want to live in 5 and 1 for the rest of our lives. We want to move into that next stage, which is refine. And it's really, really important to get through refine when you're pulling out a fat burn, going over to calories in, calories out. And then after refine, we move into that final and forever stage of renew. In the post-absorptive state, the body will continue to use glucose from meals. I think I already read this, but since we have not overstimulated insulin, fat can start leaving the fat cells in order to provide any additional calories the body needs. Additionally, the lack of excess calories, insulin, and the baseline. This helps the fat calories maintain normal brain energy levels, which decrease cravings and mood swings. Now that we're in the fasting state, we then use the fat from our fat cells as the energy source until we have our next fueling. This is an extremely gentle, sustainable way to fuel and keep our weight at a healthy and health optimal. This is all done without the difficult task of not eating carbohydrates, which are what gives our food its variety, or the other option of fasting, where you simply don't eat for many hours a day or at a time. We are all about making it easy, simple, and sustainable. That's Dr. Ray says that all the time. Everything has to be simple for it to be sustainable. The benefits are immediate. Our system avoids the prolonged high levels of insulin that can lead to diabetes in susceptible individuals. When that happens, the pancreas can no longer produce the right amount of insulin to control blood sugar, which can cause type 2 diabetes. And that's why it's running rampant through the world and through the US, and may eventually be unable to make insulin at all, which can cause type 1 diabetes. Unfortunately, as we go about consuming our supersized meal in bliss, the damage begins without us noticing. Deep inside, high insulin levels are creating a state of inflammation, decreasing the flexibility of our blood vessels and causing the premature aging of our cells. The warning signs are poor sleep, low energy, headaches, thirst, craving, and hunger. For many of us, these signs seem like nothing more than one more reason to stop at the fast food drive-thru or local drugstore to grab a soda or some painkillers. In fact, over 7 million Americans right now have diabetes and don't even know it. The good news is that once you get your fueling mixture correct through My Healthy Eating program, you're going to feel unbelievably better. It will be like switching the high performance fuel. And what's more, it has the power to prevent diabetes or even stop it in its tracks. Note, the CDC just released in July of 2017 that more than 100 million U.S. adults are now living with diabetes and prediabetes. The power of low glycemic eating. Let's read the sidebar. Micro habit of health. If you have to eat out, reference the glycemic index chart at thehabitsofhealth.com or your Habits of Health app. No, we have the Optavia app now. Before you order, remember, stay in the green to stay lean. Remember, food can be used in one of two ways: as an energy source or stored away in fat cells. When you eat a high glycemic meals, those cells respond by turning on the insulin and stimulating an enzyme that ramps up your body storage system. Low glycemic eating, however, shuts down your fat factory. Let's see how that's going to work in phase 1. Right now, you're probably eating too many calories, mostly from unhealthy carbohydrates like soda, bread, cookies, pizza, corn, flakes, instant rice, or any number of cheap, plentiful, and tasty high glycemic foods. To find out just what happens to our bodies when we eat foods like these day in and day out, let's first take a look at the glycemic index, a great tool that makes it easy for you to choose carbohydrates that support health. The glycemic index, GI, was created in 1981 by David Jenkins, and it provides a standard for determining which foods rise blood sugar the most, thereby stimulating insulin production and weight gain. Using pure glucose or sugar as a reference point, Dr. Jenkins fed a variety of foods to his subjects and studied what happened to their glucose and insulin levels. Take a look at the following chart to see the results from eating pure glucose, which has a GI score of 100 on a scale of 0 to 100. Note the glycemic index of food is the percentage area under the curve compared to glucose. So again, baseline 0, but sugar is 100. And so after eating sugar, it maxes out right about 30 minutes. It's that top, that red, and then it slowly comes down within about an hour, and it takes a long time to get back to the green. When you eat pure glucose sugar, your blood sugar levels rise steeply and then falls. Glucose has a score of 100 on the glycemic index, a standard measure of glycemic content in foods. The glycemic index uses a scale of 0 to 100. Now let's see what happens when you eat low glycemic foods like lentils. FYI, these small green legumes make a great tasty soup. And we don't use legumes during the losing phase, but lentils, the glycemic index is 28. So here's the chart. So you see that sugar is the one that spikes up way high to 100, and legumes is the dotted line. It brings it up a little bit, but then it gets back to it. Actually never really leaves a healthy range. It just brings it up a little bit, and then our insulin, our pancreas can put a little bit of insulin in there to bring that back down. Compare the rise in blood glucose levels when you eat lentils, green line, as opposed to the pure sugar, yellow line. The curve is much less steep when you eat lentils, which have lower glycemic content. As you can see, lentils raise blood sugar only 28% as much as the glucose does, thereby creating far less demand on the pancreas to secrete insulin. The release of sugar is much slower because the body has to break down the lentils to obtain the energy, whereas in the pure sugar, its absorption is almost instantaneous. Your body can handle high glycemic food some of the time, but when you eat such foods daily, you create a chronic state of hyperinsulinemia, the first step on the downward path to non-sickness and diabetes. Not to mention that this constant high level of glucose and insulin turns on fat storage and converts all the extra energy to, yep, you guessed it, fat. And what do you think happens after your blood sugar level peaks? It drops, of course, to below normal. The result is hunger pains and craving, and soon enough, have us running for the next vending machine. Here's a closer look at what happens when we eat high glycemic versus low glycemic. So the red and then the lower one. And again, the full red, that's what happens when we're eating sugar. And then our body produces the insulin to go up there and cover it and bring it back down. Now look at the lentils one though. The lentils bring it up, and then our body only has to release a little bit of insulin, and then it comes back down, and it never really leaves that unhealthy stage. And that's allowing our body to work like it was meant to. When you eat low glycemic foods, your blood sugar and insulin levels don't rise as dramatically as they do when you eat high glycemic foods. As a result, you don't get a rebound effect that can cause your blood sugar to dip below normal between meals and lead to cravings and hunger pains. Now look what happens when we eat high glycemic foods all day long. So this is the nightmare of eating bad foods, and our body never can get to a healthy place. We've got drops, we've got highs, we've got, and our pancreas is just overworked and overstimulated. So I'm going to read the sidebar. Half of an 8-ounce, oh, this is a huge one. Half of an 8-ounce bag of potato chip weighs about 100 grams and contains 534 calories. Again, half of an 8-ounce bag. You can easily eat that in one setting and probably follow it up with a couple beers. Even though this is a lot of calories, high fat, high energy, high carbohydrate processed food like these may even trigger us to eat more food. Now, on the other side, compare this to 1,000 grams or 2.2 pounds of broccoli. 2.2 pounds. Do you know what 2.2 pounds of broccoli is? It has 340 calories. The weight is 10 times greater, and imagine how many days it would take to eat that amount. Energy density and volumetrics are powerful allies in helping us curb our hunger and creating healthy habits. that crazy? That's one that really has stood out to me over the years. So and I kept thinking it was an 8-ounce bag of potato chips, but it's half of an 8-ounce bag. Has another third more of the calories. 2.2 pounds of broccoli. And we wonder why, yeah, you feel full when you eat that lean green. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so if you eat unhealthy glycemic food all day, such as in the typical Western diet, you will experience enormous swings in blood sugar levels. Peaks that then dip down to low between meals. Your insulin levels stay high, causing you to store energy as fat, putting an enormous burden on your pancreas and paving the way to metabolic syndrome and insidious diseases such as diabetes. As you can see, constant spikes in the blood sugar are interspersed with dips between meals that bring about cravings for yet more quick carbohydrates, and the insulin level remains elevated continuously. Today, over 45 million people in the US alone suffer from hyperinsulin, as a result of habits of disease like these. In phase 1, thank you, we're going to turn off your insulin pump by limiting your intake of low glycemic carbohydrates, foods that are 30 and under on the glycemic index, your dark green charts. Then we'll add nutrient-dense but low-calorie fuel sources to help you feel full and gain control over your intake. It all adds up to fat-busting, inflammation-soothing combo. Now, let's turn to our second major food group, fat. So Dr. A on the right-hand side says, try this tip. Fill up faster by starting with a broth-based, not grain-based soup or a big low-density salad as a first course. Down at the bottom it says satiety, the state of being full, leptogenic, likely to cause someone to become thin. Left sidebar on the next page. Dr. A says heart disease in France is 60%, wow, 60% lower than in the US. Could it be the red wine? Once you reach phase 2, read my guide to red wine and longevity at thehabitsofhealth.com. Now we're on to fat. Fat, less than 20%, 25% of your daily calories, less than 7% from saturated fats, especially in phase 1, range 20 to 35%. How big a role does fat ingestion have on blood sugar and insulin response? Let's take a look. Pure fat load, glucose, insulin response. So there's the chart. That's way low. Fat, unlike carbohydrates, has little effect on the blood sugar and insulin levels. However, fat is extremely energy dense, calorie dense, meaning that even small amounts contains lots of calories. The effect is pretty negligible, as you can see. Fat's role in weight gain and weight loss is related to its energy density rather than its effect on glucose and insulin. In fact, with 9 calories per gram, it provides over twice the energy per gram as carbohydrates. That caloric density helps explain why it's so easy to overdo our calorie intake by too much fat. Recognize a serving of olive oil is 1 teaspoon. I see people drizzling olive oil all over their food or all over their salad. And I'm thinking, oh, holy Hannah, because that's like 1,000 calories right there. And it's simply fat. Okay. It's easy for our bodies to store it in virtually unlimited amounts. To help you keep fat in control, my healthy eating system encourages you to eat only healthy fats and to carefully monitor your overall fat consumption. So like it said up at the top, it's only, they try to keep it, your saturated fats to only 20 to 20 or 35% of. So that's like 1/3 of the amount of fat to be saturated, because saturated is not as healthy as unsaturated or monosaturated, you know. And again, of the whole of our macronutrients, it's only 25%, 20 to 25%. So, and recognize a lot of people are like, oh, nuts, they're protein. No, they're fat with a little protein sprinkled in there. There's a lot of things that we just don't realize. That salad dressing, just regular salad dressing, you can end up with 1,000 calories really, really fast. I'm always afraid of like the Caesar salad because it doesn't take much of that dressing and you've got enough sodium for a week. So just be very mindful what's on those things. And the croutons, they push it right over the top. So anyways, total side note of my own. The Mediterranean diet provides general guidelines for healthy fats. Your fat should come from avocados, nuts, especially walnuts, pistachios, almonds, olives, and olive oil. And recognize olives, it's only 8 is a full fat. Olive oil, coconut oil, fatty fishes like salmon and tuna, eggs. Eggs are high in fat, so that's why they're in the lean category, like the salmon. Dark chocolate, once you're at that place, that's actually on the list for once we get into the optimization phase, or that renew phase is what we're calling it now. Ground flaxseed and occasionally grass-fed beef or pork. It is important to stay on the lower percentage of your diet during phase 1, the reset while you're losing weight. Recognize if you have too much calories, that's why it's so important to measure that fat. 1 teaspoon, or if you're doing a reduced calorie or reduced fat, remember it has to be reduced fat or it's not a fat. If you do fat free, there's no fat in it, so you can't count it as fat. It has to be a condiment. But reduced fat, 2 tablespoons, but it needs to be measured. It's very important for the balance. And sometimes I think that we're like, it's only a teaspoon of olive oil. It's very important for the body to work properly. In fact, last night on the Let's Talk, they did a great job talking a little bit more about fats. So, okay, shifting over to protein. This is 20 to 25% of your daily calories. And actually, it's higher than that when we're in the losing phase. We keep it to about 40%. But once we get into optimization or that renew phase, we do bring it down quite a bit. While protein provides energy, it's also our body's building block for cellular structure, immune function, and the myriad of health-giving processes under my eating plan. Where every meal includes highly digestible protein sources, you benefit from consistent supply of this important nutrient. This keeps your body from using muscle as a fuel source. Do you hear that? Cannibalizing your muscle mass is what he just said. That's why it's so important. A common problem on many other weight loss plans, we lose muscle. And regular protein means that your body has adequate building material for the repair and growth of critical support structures. Additionally, studies have shown protein to be highly effective in spurring weight loss and maintenance. First, by helping you feel full, and second, by requiring more energy to digest that carbohydrates and fats do. You'll find out more about protein as a weight loss tool in the next section. When we discuss satiety, the science of fullness. Animal products have always been part of the human consumption, but the quality of the animal protein is very dependent on whether it is from grass-fed range animals that live natural lives versus factory-raised animals. Industrial animals production also raises major environmental and ethical issues on animal treatment. And the saturated fats, hormones, and antibiotics are good reason to avoid eating factory-raised animal products, including meat, poultry, and fish. You can get all of the necessary protein from plant-based sources, whether through a vegetarian diet with eggs and dairy or a vegan diet that contains no animal products at all. The Nurses' Health Study showed a 30% reduction in heart disease for those that ate their protein from vegetable sources. There are some thoughts that the higher levels of amino acid in animal protein may stimulate higher release of insulin versus plant proteins. But remember, even vegans and vegetarians, we really need to get high quality protein in some sort. And now it's really nice that we have the EAAs to help create what's necessary for that. All right, and we are out of time. We are at the end of this, so have a fabulous week.